Good morning, everyone, and happy Sunday. It didn't turn on. So go. Sorry, Mechila. All right, Parshat Matot-Masei. We have a double parsha this week, and it's this parsha is goes through some of the laws of Nedarim. It also tells us a little bit about the of Shevet Reuven and Shevet Gad, who come over to Moshe and ask Moshe for permission to not cross the Yarden. Now, you have to be mindful that when you're reading these psukim, it's in the context of, 40 years have passed. The 38 years earlier, you had the Maraglim happening, and now at the end of this, can you imagine Moshe getting this request? Reuven and God coming and say, "Listen, Moshe, we're not going across we're not going to Israel. We're not going to cross the Yarden. We're gonna stay here. We like it here in Galut. We're going to stay in the Jordan, area, and we're not going to cross." And we know that the Pasukim and the Chachamim point out that there was a little bit of a lack of focus on the most important things over here. Right? Pasuk says, second, it says, Mikne Rav Haya Levnei Reuven Uvnei Gad Atzu Me'od. They had a lot of cattle. Okay, they see the land is very good. Vayovo Bnei Gad Ubnei Reuven V'yomru El Moshe Elazar Kohen Asiya Eda. Atorot Dibun Va'azor. It goes to all the names of the cities. Okay, these are the cities that were conquered. Give us this land for inheritance. We're not crossing the Yarden. Your brothers are going to go out to war, and you're going to stay here? What's wrong with you? Lama. Te'enun et lev bnei Israel. Why are you going to go ahead and weaken the hearts of the Jewish people? You're going to fracture the people. Why would you want to do this? So he says, this is what happened. He goes through the whole story, what happened way back with the Maraglim and so on and so forth. And then they come back and they say, Moshe, don't worry about it. We're going to come back into the land of Israel. We're going to come, we're going to fight, we're going to do this. Moshe, im ta'asun davar hazeh, right? If you're going to go ahead and arm yourself up for war, you can take all the armed people to the Yarden of Hashem. You're going to come and conquer the land of Hashem. Then you'll be absolved. Okay, right? You don't do this. You do. You're going to be sinners. There's a little bit of reversal over here. When they come first to Moshe, they say, Moshe, we want to go ahead to the cities of Jordan because we want to build special pens for our cattle and cities for our children. And then Moshe reverses it later. No, you're building cities first for your children and then pen for your cattle. And we often see this as a misaligned priority, right? Like on the one hand, like you're going to stay in Galut. Why are you focusing on the places for your sheep and cattle when you should be really worrying about building something for your children? So there's Rav Yosef Ber of Salant has an interesting idea. He says this is not really a criticism on them, but really, if you think about it, when Hashem brought Sichon and Og Melech HaBashan out to war, Pasuk tells us that all of the men went out, and Hashem did this on purpose. Rashi points out so that the war would not happen in the city itself, so that this way they would draw all the inhabitants out, and when Bnei Yisrael would win that war, the cities would be left intact. So when Bnei Reuven and Gad come in and they see these cities were ready to move in condition houses, but they did not have the infrastructure to support the amount of cattle that these groups had. So they said, we don't have to worry about our children already have houses, right? We got to figure out how to protect the livestock that we have so we can go ahead and continue to provide for our houses. But Moshe says no. Moshe says that that's not enough. The houses in Chutz La'aretz were filled with all kinds of avodah zarah, all kinds of idol worship, idolatry. And Moshe is saying, even though these houses are finished and moving condition, what's going to be your priority? I often host many groups for Shabbat at my house. And, people often ask me, Rabbi, why are your couches facing your bookshelves? Where's your TV? I'm like, there's no TV. Because the primary function of my house, right, the most meeting places in America, you have a nice couch and you're facing a screen. You're facing, you're watching something. But in my house, the way I have it set up is that the couches are facing my Sfarim, my books, because that's the primary function of a house. The primary function of a house is a place where you're going to go ahead and impart your values, your ideals to your children, Bezrat Hashem, right? And this is the concern. So And if you look closer, the Pesukim keep going further, right? Who comes and asks the request to stay Transjordan? Two Shvatim, right? Shevet, Reuven, and Gad. So then why is it later when Moshe is telling them, okay, you could go ahead and stay, but Chetzi Shet Menashe has to stay as well? Why did Menashe get stuck with Reuven and Gad? They didn't want to stay there. They weren't the ones complaining about their cattle. Why are they here all of a sudden out of nowhere? And it's interesting, if you look closer again at the Pesukim over there, where is it? It says as follows. It says, "V'yitin lahem Moshe levnei Gad ulevnei Reuven ulechetzi shevet Menashe ben Yosef et mamlechet Sichon melech HaAmori." Where do they come from? Why are you adding in Menashe over there? And also, why are you adding the fact that Menashe is a descendant of Yosef? Why are you adding that over here? So this is a similar idea you're going to see even later on in Parshat in the later Parshiot in Masai, when you're dealing with the idea of Irei Miklat. We know that the Irei Miklat were cities of refuge. The cities of refuge were designed for a person who killed B'shogeg, a man who had en dat, lacking dat. He was unaware of his murder. And this guy, he could go ahead and run away to the city Ir Miklat, and he'll be protected over there. And he was, B'dafka, these cities are the cities that the Levi'im were protecting. So why are you sending these murderers, these vagabonds into these Ir Miklat? Why these particular cities? Why with Shevet Levi? Because Shevet Levi, their job was to inspire the people. Their job is to go ahead and elevate the people. They were the educators. And this person is lacking da'at. When you're lacking da'at, you're actually lacking a chibur, you're lacking a connection to God. And the whole purpose of them being in these cities is to kind of reunite and reconnect to the ultimate source of things. The Arizal teaches us something profound. He says that each month has a particular shevet that's associated with it. The month of Tammuz is Shevet Reuven. The month of Av is Shevet Shimon. And the Arizal points out, not an accident, that these 2 months are also, like every month of the calendar, it has a specific body part, an organ, that's associated with that particular chodesh, that month. And the month of Tammuz is associated with the Ri'iyah, with the eyes. And the month of Av is associated with Shmi'ah, with the ozen, with the ears. And this is not accidental. You see, it's in the month of Tammuz that the Mekubalim point out that the Meraglim spoke Lashon Hara. Right? They spoke Lashon Hara. It's the month of Tammuz, is the month of Av they spoke Lashon Hara. That's when the Bnei Yisrael heard the report. But it's the month of Tammuz that they went out. They started the spying in Tammuz. And therefore, the Chachamim point out there was something broken in their Ri'iyah. They looked at the land of Israel and they couldn't see it properly. They couldn't interpret what they saw, and they couldn't give it over to the Jewish people. And therefore, when the Jewish people came and they heard what they said, there's two things that were broke. Our power of seeing broke in the month of Tammuz, and our power of hearing broke in the month of Av. And this is actually fascinating, because you would think that seeing is more profound than hearing. That seeing is way more important. But actually, if you look closer in the halachot, in the laws of damages, if someone damages someone's eye, right, how much do you pay him back for the damage of his eye? Versus someone who is damaged by his loss of hearing. So someone who is lost his sight, you pay him for whatever the sight was worth, whatever that number comes up in the Gemara, how they come to that configuration. But however, if someone loses his hearing, you got to pay him for the full value of a person. Well, why is that? Why is there more value in Judaism placed on Shmi'ah, on listening, than Riyah, on seeing? We all know that seeing is believing, right? So seeing, everyone would agree, seeing is everything. But seeing doesn't really work the way you and I understand it. From a very, I guess, a place of physics, we know that seeing is really only today a reflection of light. When you see something today, all you're seeing is the light reflecting off your face. You're not actually seeing the essence of something. In the world of Adam, before the Chet, there was something called the Or HaGanuz, special light. The light that shone from one end of the world to the other end of the world. And it says that that Adam could look out and see everything from front to the end. Right? It's interesting that seeing is the only sense that only works in one direction. Shmi'ah, you can hear from behind you. Right? Smelling, like every other sense works 360. But Riyah is something that only works in front of me. But when before Adam sinned, sight worked in a way where you could see from behind as well. You could actually see the whole thing from front to the end. You could see behind your head. That's gone. So, but why is Shmi'ah more important? Why is the Ozen, why is hearing more important? You see, we say that Shmi'ah is much more than listening. Shmi'ah also comes from the words Vayishama. It says Vayishama Shaul et ha'am. And Shaul gathered the people. So what does gathering have to do with Shmi'ah, with listening? You see, if you've missed the first 2 minutes or the first minute, the first sentence of this idea, the whole entire binyan falls apart. Right? The whole structure, everything that I'm sharing doesn't work anymore. You're missing something, right? But Riyah doesn't work that way, because I could look away for a second and come back. Whatever's there, it's there. Nothing changed. But Shmi'ah is very much dependent on a building of ideas. And therefore, Churban, the destruction that we experience during this time, is predicated on this idea that something is broken. A building is built brick by brick, brick by brick, brick by brick, right? Ideas on top of ideas. A Churban is the destruction of the ideas. The lack of Shmi'ah, the lack of our ability to listen, is really a destruction in the root of the binyan. The building blocks that actually make the structure. And therefore Shmi'ah is way more important than Riyah, because it's the essence of all building blocks of all things. Not an accident, by the way, that the Ozen, right, the hearing, is tied to balance, Moznaim, right? It's how we judge things. It's how we kind of like balance ourselves in this world. And seeing is very interesting, it's nice, but it doesn't give us a full picture. It's only through Shmi'ah that we have the full picture. So the Chachamim point out the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and when we lost the first Mikdash, we lost what? We lost Nevu'ah. The Nevi'im were called Chozim, seers. And therefore the first Beit HaMikdash was a loss of our sight, the loss of having this deeper connection to God on a higher level. And the second Beit HaMikdash, right? The second Beit HaMikdash represents our loss of hearing, of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shebiktav is Riyah, Torah Sheba'al Peh is Shmi'ah. It's interesting that Torah Sheba'al Peh was lost in the second Beit HaMikdash. And our tikkun, my friends, right now, during this time, there are 528 hours from Shavasar Bat Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, right? Not an accident, there's 528 hours, because there's 528 Mishnayot in Shishay Sidra Mishnah. And therefore, the Arizal points out that this is the time where we're supposed to be working on our Shmi'iyah, on how we hear things. This is the time where we're supposed to be concerned about how we're taking in these messages of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And therefore, there's a specific avodah of working on Mishnah during this time of the year, right? It's Mishnah that's the tikkun for the loss of the Churban. You want to fix the broken building, right? The Gemara tells us that any generation that has the Beit HaMikdash still destroyed, Skilu, they destroyed it. And that destruction stems from our inability to hear. So much of what's happening today in our society, of people choosing, gender, and people choosing, there's so much, I would call it insanity, that is surrounding us, that comes from a breakdown in Shmi'ah. There is no root in anything. It's whatever I think it is. It's my imagination. It's dimyon. There's no truth anymore. Truth is something that could only be discerned through the power of Shmi'ah, the Ozen, not the Riyah. The Riyah does not give me the full picture, because the light is still broken. Until that light is returned, I can't rely on what I see. Right? We said, Zeh Keli Vanveo, there was a point where we saw clarity. We lost that clarity now. Shevet Reuven, Shevet Gad, Chetzi Menashe. Why is it tied to Yosef? Yosef made it very clear that he wants to be buried in the land of Eretz Yisrael. He made it super clear that he wants to live in the land of Israel. Bonos Tzlavchad, from Menashe, fought for an inheritance in the land of Israel. Moshe's not a fool. He recognizes that there's a chance that if Shevet Reuven and Gad stay outside, they're going to lose out on one of the most powerful stories ever told. The Jewish people coming in and conquering the land of Israel, feeling that sense of camaraderie, a shared experience, something that unites us. Doesn't want to take that chance. You're going to come in, fine. You're going to come in, and if you come in, you will fight, you'll go back, you'll get dead. If you don't come in, right, you're still going to get a piece of the land of Israel, because the goal wasn't to separate them, the goal was to unite them. And the cherry on the top was, you know what, Menashe, sorry guys, you have this deep love for Eretz Yisrael. You're the Zionists of the time, so to speak. Half of you are staying here to be mashbiah on Reuven and Gad so they could come back to the land of Israel. Right? He wanted that connection to be there for them to come back. It's all about coming back. Moshe is a genius. Now, we know from his historical record that it's the Shvatim that were outside of Eretz Yisrael that were lost first. There's a special Kedusha that Eretz Yisrael has that allows us to stay united. And during this time, as we're in the Ben Mitzarim, in this place of between the straits, this weird time in our history, we're mourning the loss of the Beit HaMikdash. We're still telling that story. We still feel a sense of responsibility for that destruction. We should be asking ourselves, we're in Galut, we're outside. Do we have our Menashes? Do we have our Levis? What are we doing to connect to the message? What are we doing to ensure that there's still a Shmi'ah, that ozen that's able to hear that root thing, so we could actually be in a place where we can rebuild a Beit HaMikdash? Because that's what this time is about. The mourning is a side process. We say, Mishanichnas Av, Mema'atim Besimcha. It doesn't say you should be depressed. It doesn't say you should go ahead and walk around crying. You're lessening your joy, but there's still joy there. You can't build without simcha. You can't create without simcha. But this is the time where the root avodah is in transitioning from the power of seeing in the month of Tammuz, getting ready for the month of Av. God willing, it's next week, I believe, and working on this power of Shmi'ah. How do we work on Shmi'ah today? You work on Shmi'ah through humility. It's interesting that we know that Tana, right, which is the last of Tanaim, this is where the Torah Shabbat came from. The Mishnayot came from the Tanaim, right? And a Mora cannot argue with the Tana. There are very few Amoraim that can argue with Tana. They don't argue. They made a pact. We're not going to argue because they had the connection to Shmi'ah. They had this Torah connection that we don't have anymore. So the Amoraim stopped. You can only argue to a certain point. The only way I could really argue on a Tana is if I have another Tana that I bring along with me to argue on the Tana. But ideally, I should not be arguing with Tanaim at all. Same goes with Rishonim and Achronim. They're very few. We don't argue on the past because they have a deeper connection to a truth. I could only use things from the past, or the things that they heard, to describe my understanding of the world today because I'm limited, because my power of hearing and seeing is broken. I can only hold on to that past to understand where we're going today. There's no question that the state of Israel is a beautiful country. It's got a lot of work to do on so many different levels. It's so complicated there. But I truly do believe that the way in which we get there is by working on the humility of recognizing that we are still unfinished. We're still in this process of binyan, of building. And that process of binyan begins with our ability to humble ourselves, to spend more time learning in Torah Shabbat Peh, spending more time learning learning from the people that actually heard. The Mishnah itself is a reminder of what was said. Vayomer, Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi. It's always talking about in the present. When you're learning the Mishnayot, you're actually connecting to the voices that was there. You're re-hearing the people that actually heard. It's not just an act in memorizing a Mishnah of who said what. It's actually giving you the opportunity of connecting to a voice that was connected to a higher truth. It's a spiritual truth. You think that Mishnah is just about halakha. It is. But on a deeper level, it has the power of revitalizing and empowering your neshama so you have the ability of doing what you're meant to be doing in this world. May we be blessed with the power of sight. May we have the humility to work on our powering of shmi'ah, of hearing. May we have the schut of seeing the Beit HaMikdash rebuilt b'mehera b'yameinu. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Kamei Chananya ben Akasha Amar Asar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zkut Yisrael lefikach Yibeleh b'Torah Mitzvah Shenem Adonai Chatzma Yigdol Torah v'yadir. Kaddish.